So you want to build a more sustainable wardrobe, but you're not really sure that you could spot quality if you saw it. Well, today I'm going to share with you how to spot quality clothing, high quality clothing. Hello, welcome to today's video. My name is Kay and this is Dress for My Day. So I know that I am at that point in life, I will turn 60 next month, and I'm just at the point in life where I'm just kind of done with disposable clothing. I don't want to spend a boatload for my clothes. I don't want to necessarily buy things just because they're some particular name brand. I don't want things to necessarily be pricey, but I do want to only bring things into my closet that are good quality. In fact, I think it's more important as we get older to wear really good quality clothing. It just is going to look more authentic on our older selves. And so I think that is important. Today I'm going to share some great tips. We're going to talk about how to spot quality in fabric, how to spot quality in construction, and how to spot high quality in those finishing details. And I'm going to be showing you some really good quality and some that is not great, but it's okay. I don't have anything here to show you that's just like bad quality because I don't have anything in my closet that's bad quality. But I do have some things that are a little better than others, and so I'm going to show you those. You know, the way to identify a counterfeit dollar bill is not by looking at a bunch of counterfeit dollar bills. It's by looking at the genuine article over and over and over and studying it so that when you see something that's not right, you can identify that. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at a lot of good qualities in these garments that I'm going to show you so that you can spot it when it's not so good. If you like to shop secondhand, I think it is even more important to be able to spot high quality. So I think this will help you when you are shopping those consignment stores and things like that too. Leave me a comment if you know of some other factors, some other things that we can look for when it comes to quality that I don't discuss. But look, give me a chance here and let's see what I have for you. So here are my qualifications. My mother is a great seamstress. She sewed a lot of my clothes growing up, and she was a really good seamstress. She doesn't sew much anymore, but she really did a great job, and I saw what went into the labor that went into creating clothing. And then later on, of course, I learned to sew as a child, but when I had my daughter, I sewed a lot of her clothing, and I even smocked her clothing, and I did French hand sewing techniques like French seams and entre-deux and stuff like that to complete her ensembles. So I know a thing about what it takes to create quality garments and what to look for. So let's get going. First of all, we're going to talk about fabric. Now, when we're talking fabric, the first thing most people say is they only want natural fibers. And I do agree that it's great to have clothing that consists of mostly natural fibers. Those are definitely going to hold up to the test of time. Those fabrics are going to look great. They just have a really natural appeal. They're just so good. And when we're talking natural fibers, of course, we're talking cotton, linen, wool, and silk. Those are the four, I'd say, that are really, you get those straight from that fiber and they make it into a cloth that is 100% of that fiber. But, you know, there are also synthetics that are made of natural fibers, but they have to be put together through chemical processes. And then of course also there are just polyesters. So those are like plastics. They are purely man-made fibers. Now the truth though is that while I love cotton and linen and things like that and wool, a lot of times you're going to find the best fabrics though have at least a small percentage of synthetics. And there's really nothing wrong with that because it makes those natural fibers more durable. So synthetic fabrics, those that are a combination of natural fibers and synthetic fibers, are going to have more durability. They're going to have some stretch perhaps. Sometimes they're going to have waterproofing or moisture wicking capabilities. there may be something that you don't have to iron. For instance, when you combine rayon and linen, you get a really nice no iron linen. So don't be afraid of those synthetic fabrics. You know, we hear a lot about, oh, I only wear, natural fibers. But honestly, there's very little made these days that's 100% cotton or 100% linen, which I love. I love my 100% linen. And I love my 100% cotton, but there are just some times where you're going to want something that doesn't wrinkle, or it's moisture wicking, or it doesn't have to be ironed. So don't be afraid of those. Maybe just look for a higher percentage of that natural fiber and a lower percentage of those things like lyocell or tencel, rayon, viscose, those sorts of words, which are just synthetics made out of natural things. Okay, so then the next thing though, it's not just about the fiber itself. We also want to look at the hand. Now the hand is simply how the fabric feels to you. And I am just a tactile person. When I go shopping, I look at things draw me to them, and usually I do kind of have a high quality radar. I'm very drawn to high quality, but sometimes I get to that garment is hanging there and I feel of it and immediately I pass it by because it just doesn't feel right. Maybe it feels kind of plastic, maybe it feels kind of shiny, maybe it feels scratchy or just cheap, So, there's definitely something to be said just for feeling the fabrics. Also, does it look like it is has substance to it? So it's opaque and it's not see-through. Now, some things are supposed to be see-through today, right? But this jacket shouldn't be, and it's not. It's a nice linen. It's substantial, it's a tight enough of a weave to where it's not see-through. And yet there are linens out there that are very sheer. So we want to consider that, consider the density of the fabric. You also want to be able to look at the fabric and the garment and just see how does it hang just on the hanger even. So for instance, I'm looking at this jacket and it looks to me like it hangs really nicely and evenly. I can tell it has a nice weight. That's another thing I want to look for is just the weight of the fabric. For instance, something like a blazer like this, I don't want it to be poofy on me. I don't want it to stand out or have puffs and everything. I want it to really drape my body to hang nicely. And so that is a part of the quality of this blazer is that it does hang nicely and it drapes the body nicely. Things like having a vent in the back of a jacket can help that. Having some darts, here on the side, so that makes it, gives it a curve instead of a straight jacket. So this jacket also has some curves here in the back, some nicely curved pieces there in the back. And I also noticed that the sleeves have just a gentle puffing in them, nothing really noticeable, but just a nice little give. So they're going to fit over my shoulders nicely. I also want to see that the collar has a nice drape, that it lays nicely on the hanger like it does here, and it looks like it's going to lay nicely when I put it on too. So of course I would try the jacket on, and once again make sure that it just falls really nicely even before it's ironed, before it's steamed or anything like that. So those are just some of the things I want to look at about the fabric, is taking note of the quality, the hand, the way it feels, the weight, and the drape. Now, another thing you want to do when you're just looking at the fabric is notice the color. And I don't have any here really, but colored fabrics, you want to look for colors that are a little bit deeper and very saturated, because the more saturated the fabric is with that color, really that's just extra money. I mean, that took them extra time, it cost a little more, and those colors, those deeper or at least more saturated colors, are going to stand up to the test of time longer. They are going to look fashionable longer than things that are kind of barely pigmented. Generally, I think it's better to even lean into solids than prints. And when you do find prints, you want to make sure that those prints are consistent throughout, and that of course you're going to want things to line up at the seams. So for instance, even with, just look at this shirt, it's just a striped shirt. So it's not a big print, not a busy print, but they did do a great job of making sure that these stripes line up with the stripes on the back yoke here. So the stripes on the sleeve and the stripes on the back yoke. And this is a 9 West shirt, nothing real expensive, but they did line up those stripes. That's even more important when you're dealing with things like plaids and paisleys and flowers and things like that. It makes it a little harder. Another thing, look how they did this. So it has a pocket here on the front, and that pocket lines up really nicely with the stripes on the shirt. So you really can't even see the pocket unless you get up really nice and close on it. So those are the kinds of things you're going to want to pay attention to when it comes to just looking at the fabric and how it fits into the construction of the garment. Okay, let's talk about construction now. So we're moving beyond the fabric to the construction of the garment. And of course, I have several different types of garments here I want to talk to you about. Let's just start with this blazer. So some of the things we want to look for are, of course, even seams. And of course, we can see on this blazer, top stitched here, even on the collar of the blazer, really nice even seams. And really, you also can look at stitches per inch, or SPI. And ideally, I think it's nice to have 10 to 12 stitches per inch. So if you were to take a tape measure and put it alongside the stitches here, it would be great if you had, let's say, 10 stitches per inch. That's really nice, tight stitching, but that's just not going to always happen. And even on some of your higher quality garments, you may see more like 8 to 10 stitches per inch. And I think that's okay still. I'm okay with 8 stitches per inch, but lower than that, and you're getting those stitches so far apart that you really do run the risk of losing some of the durability in that garment, especially where it really matters, like maybe in a pant seam along the sides or in the crotch or something like that. You certainly don't want to budge on that. But of course, on the tops of fabrics, like on the top of a collar, it's really important that that top stitching be even and it really be nice and pretty. Now the inside is just lined with a durable polyester is what they call it, so I think it has a little stretch to it, but it's really pretty and silky, and they did some nice things, like they have a little tape up here at the top of the lining, which is really nice little detail. The lining is vented here at the top, has a little tuck, little gathering here, and then at the bottom you want to make sure that your lining has a little bit of a poof, that there's a little bit of extra fabric. It is really nice that that lining is attached at the bottom of the jacket. They're not always. I like it when they are, and this one is from Talbot's. But it does have some give there too, and that's important because when you put that jacket on, you need the lining to have some movement in it as your body molds to it. So another thing about this jacket that I really like is that the button has a shank, and that is that little wrapping of thread, wrapping of some additional thread between the button and the fabric. After they've sewn the button on, they've given it a little extra space, and then they went around and around it with that thread and made a little shank so that the button stands out from the fabric so that you can easily button the garment and it lays correctly as that jacket. Now, another great thing to have on a blazer that jacket does not have, but the one I'm wearing does, are stay buttons. And those are the little teeny buttons, usually kind of small buttons, that are inside the jacket where the button is. Right, here's my button, and it is stitched to the stay button on the inside. So that gives it that added security. So I would say that a blazer needs to have at least one or the other, and sometimes they have both. Now these gold buttons on my black Veronica Beard jacket, they stand out from the jacket already. They have a button, that has that shank on it, built into it. So it doesn't need a shank. That would just be too much space. It already has some space. So it has the stay button, and that works really nicely. Now, of course, you also want want buttons to be sewn on really pretty, if you can have some interesting buttons like a wooden button or these, little metal buttons, those are great. But a lot of buttons are plastic these days, and that's okay. You just want it to coordinate with the fabric nicely. And sometimes it's nice for it to be the same color as the fabric. Other times you want it to stand out. Of course, you want to also check the buttons and the placement on the sleeve cuffs. And it's always nice for these garments to come with an extra button and maybe even some extra thread. And what that indicates is that that retailer or that brand expects this garment to last long enough to where you may need to replace a button or use some thread eventually to mend or to replace a button. So that's really an indicator of high quality. Let's talk about pants now, and I've got several pants to share with you. These are some beautiful wool pants, or a wool blend from Me and M. So it's a brand that's fairly new to me, and I wore these Sunday and I love them. They have so many great details. First of all, they have beautiful pleats here on the front, but the pleats don't start up here at the top, which would make them poofy. They're a nice flat pleat. So that's a really beautiful detail. Those pleats are kind of like blind too. I don't really hardly even see them. They're just really blended into the fabric. Another really cool detail that this pant has is it doesn't actually have a side seam. It has a side panel. So that really creates a beautiful, no bulge look there on the side of this pant when you wear them. You don't get any bulges, sticking out from your hips. And in fact, that makes it too where this pocket, a hidden, like invisible pocket here, is really kind of towards the front of the garment instead of being on the side. So it does not add visual weight to you or, visual wideness to you because that pocket is just hidden here just barely to the front of the fabric. Another thing they've done here is they've given me 2 belt loops at the back, which I always really like. Not all garments have those anymore, and I really appreciate that. They did a great job of putting darts on either side of the back of your back, back side here, and it blends into the pocket really nicely. Those back little darts are really great, and it's really nice if a garment can have 2 of those even. On the inside of a garment, now here I turned this pair of pants wrong side out already. These are from Talbot's, and I'm just showing you these wrong side out because you do want to look at your seams on the inside. You definitely want to look inside, and everything should look really pretty and neat inside. Not that you're going to wear it wrong side out, but you want to see that everything is just really nice and tidy. Now, if you see some loose threads, unless those threads are like unraveling, I just don't worry about that. If you see a little loose, just a little thread sticking out, I just take those home and clip them off. That's not a deal breaker. So I can certainly do that. But if there was threads that are picking or starting to pull, that would be a problem. This garment has beautiful little silky pockets, so that's nice. It's really going to give you some give there. You want to make sure that there is some give in the fabric of any pockets so that they're not too tight where you can't even get your hand in there. You want to make sure that the zip fly lays really nicely, as well as, of course, where it buttons. And check out these buttonholes. It's also really important to make sure that you have some nice buttonholes, and I especially like keyhole buttonholes like this. So that means they're basically straight, and then one side of them has like a little bit bigger, like a rounder hole, and that's the side where the button is going to kind of, pull at, and so that just makes it lay even nicer. Now look, inside your pants, here's a few ways that they can finish the pants. The edges of the fabric should always be finished. So here we've just got a serging finish. So that's just serging alongside the edge of the unfinished end of the fabric there. But then where they've sewn the fabric together, this part of the pant leg together, then they laid that seam open, pressed it open, and they've serged either side of that and laid it open. Talbot's did that, and I've noticed they've done that on several of theirs on the inside of the leg. So what that means is it's going to feel good when you're sitting, when you're walking. You're not going to have anything rubbing against you here on the inside of the leg. But I've noticed that other brands have done that on the outside of the leg. Talbot's left theirs where they just serged the 2 pieces of fabric together. They made the seam and then they serged that together to finish that seam. So those are two different ways you can finish it. Here in the back, they also laid it flat. So that means that back is going to lay nice and flat, going all the way down to the crotch. But the side one is serged. And I've worn these and I found them to wear really nicely. They didn't poke out or anything like that. And I think that kind of has to do with the weight of the fabrics. This is a nice, substantial weight fabric. This is a polyester pant, but it weighs really nicely. It's a beautiful fabric. It has a really nice hand. And that's why I say don't completely, for me at least, I'm not going to completely say I'm not wearing any synthetics, because sometimes they feel really nice and really kind of give you the best wear. Let's look at some casual pants. These are some casual pants by Air, kind of a chino, and see some of the ways that they have finished their seams. This one, they did the seam, then they laid the seam down and top stitched it. So all of these seams in this pant lay down really nicely. The only seams that don't lay down, let's see, this front seam is kind of ironed down. It's serged, and so is the inside seam is serged. But the outside seam is laid down so that it's not going to, once again, it's not going to poke out on your sides. So those are just things you definitely want to take note of. The pockets are cotton on these pants, and they're nice and full, and they're not so full they're going to cause, rumpling inside, but they're full enough to get your hands into and to actually be functional. I want you to see here on this particular chino type pant, it's actually a utility pant from Me and M. They have finished off their waistband with bias tape. So they've got those raw edges there, and they probably did serge them, but they also put bias tape on top of them, so they're completely finished and you don't see those edges. And the same on the sides even. They have just a little thin thing of bias tape there, so we don't have any raw, rough edges there. It's just a really nice quality to that garment. Let's talk briefly about jeans now. I wanted to show you the difference in a few jeans. So these jeans are the St. John's Bay jeans from JCPenney that have just been big sellers at my blog and here. And they are great jeans. When I did the little stitches per inch test on them and found out that they are a 10 stitch per inch jean. And so that's really great. That's really impressive. However, there's a few things I don't like. If you'll notice, the fly, the little button fly here, the stitching, the little double stitching is really close together. And also their thread is pretty bright and bold against the fabric. It's pretty high contrast. And on the front here, there's a little bit of just some, kind of, I don't know, to me kind of a little messy looking, right here at this button area, some of the stitching is. That's not a deal breaker. In fact, for me, I find that jeans, the most important thing is the way they fit on you, the way they feel, and the way they hang. So little things like that, I wouldn't worry too much. However, here is something that is a big thing I think we need to think about. Usually on your jean, you want your hem area to have a little bit of a roughness to it. So all of the best jeans, including Levi's and everything else, you'll notice, let's see, these are by Talbot's, and they have at the hem, you can just see the fabric is different. It just has that faded look, a little worn, as though it's kind of been rubbed up against the floor or something, and it just looks different. In fact, if you have your hem, your jeans hemmed, ideally what you want to do is take this hem off and have it replaced on your jeans, have it put back on, because to have that look, otherwise your jeans look like, well, like this when they're hemmed, and that doesn't look as authentic. So this is something that they put in here intentionally, this little just roughness around the hem. So that's something that you want. That's a characteristic you want. As far as like things like distressing and all, those are things that generally you're actually paying for. That doesn't have anything to do with the quality. So like these jeans from Madewell, I have to tell you, they are made well. I've really looked these over, and they have some of the best stitching, really even stitching, really like enforced stitching. and just really nice features. One of the nice features on them is the way they have the yoke back here in the back makes more of a V. And that is going to be more flattering. It's just going to be a little bit more contouring to the rear area and just make it look a little bit nicer than if your yoke area back there is more flat, as it is on this St. John's jean. Nothing wrong with this jean, not trying to pick it apart, but I just want you to see you kind of do get what you pay for when it comes to jeans. And so once again, though, we're still just looking for those little details. This is a pair from J. Jill, and they've done that really nice thing of those two little darts back here on these kind of trouser jeans, and I really like that. However, one of the things I did notice, though, this is a trouser jean, and ideally, trouser jeans should have a nice thick hem at the bottom. And indeed, the Talbot's jean does have that nice thicker hem, see, than the J. Jill jean does. So I kind of like that. So those are just the kinds of details you want to look for. Once again, nice even stitching and some really nice little details in the pockets. I need to remove those little threads there, of course, but really good little jeans here by Talbot's too. Let's move on to shirts, because this is really important. Now, like I said, this little shirt here from Nine West, they did some great things with the pocket. They did some great things lining up the stripes on the sleeve, but they've kind of stopped there. And so it is nicely stitched. There's nothing wrong with the stitching. It has a lining on the inside of the back yoke, so that's nice. But when you compare it to this Citizens of Humanity shirt, which does cost quite a bit more, there are so many nice details on this shirt. For instance, here at the cuffs of the sleeves. Now, not only does it have a little feature where you can roll the sleeves up and you can button them to these little buttons here on the side of the sleeve, that's really cool, but just look at the little detail work here at the button placket, where they have added this little panel of fabric there and stitched it just so beautifully, just really, really nice. And then on the inside of this shirt, it just is stitched really nicely also. In fact, the seams are they're French seams, so which means they doubled over those seams. That really means you sew it right sides to, wrong sides together first, and then you flip it over and you make right sides, and then they've laid that seam down. So there are no unfinished seams at all, not even serged. They're all, French seams laid down, beautiful inside this shirt. So those are the kinds of details that you're paying for with this 100% cotton shirt with a nice little, also has some beautiful little tucks back here on the back, has that little loop right there. It's just some really cool little features that the Nine West shirt doesn't have. So those are sorts of things you're looking for. Now here's something really important about t-shirts, and that is the grain of the fabric. This applies on everything, pants, shirts like this, jeans and all. But the place I find the biggest problem is on t-shirts. When you're cutting out a fabric, you're cutting out the pattern for this shirt, for instance, you have to lay all the pieces on the grain the same way. So they have to be like the grain of this fabric needs to be completely horizontal. It needs to lie in the inside of the shirt. It needs to lay completely horizontal so that it stretches side to side, right? Not diagonally. But sometimes what will happen is these manufacturers will try to save fabric and save money, but they'll turn a piece of a pattern just to make it fit on the fabric. And when they do that, so then things are not cut out the right way, and that's when you get that little twisted effect on your t-shirt. If you ever had that where the t-shirt just wants to twist, and you take it out of the dryer, you try to fold it together, and it won't even fold together because it's just twisted. So what happened is they laid the pattern out on their fabric incorrectly, trying to save some fabric and trying to save some money, cutting corners, literally, and then that's why it makes that t-shirt t-shirt kind of twisty on you. It also can happen in pants, and that's when you end up with that little, like one leg feels like it just wants to twist off of you. Have you ever had that? That's why. So the thing to do there is to look, get your glasses on, your reading glasses on, and look at the fabric and make sure that that grain on the inside of your fabric goes horizontal completely. You know, one side to the other, that it does not go diagonal at all, or you're going to end up with that twisting effect. So you can see I turned this t-shirt wrong side out just so that we could see the grain of the fabric. This is a LL Bean t-shirt. It's one of my favorites, actually. I like it because it has a nice thick neckline up here, and you'll notice, I've noticed that the really best t-shirts to me, in the front they have serging, and then they're stitched to lay flat here, and then in the back they often have a little bias tape on the back of the neckline just to really reinforce that, make sure it lays against your back really nicely. It feels really comfortable and it lays there really good. The front of these seams are, these are serged. They're gonna lay really nicely on the shoulder. And then you always want to make sure too that the seams are sewn and laid down to where they're gonna lay down the same way all the way. Every once in a while I'll get something from a less quality brand, and like up here the seam will be sewn this way, and down here it's sewn that way, and you had this little bump. That's not good. We don't want that. So that is just like foundational. You've got to make sure that the seams are laid down and then stitched at the top and the bottom of that seam so they'll lay nice and flat. But I want you to see how the grain does go from side to side here. So this t-shirt should serve me well. And the last thing I want to share with you is about fully fashioned finishes on your sweaters and knitwear. So on sweaters and other knitwear, things that are knit together, there's two ways of doing that, and fully fashioned is what you want to look for. Fully fashioned means that the pieces were each knit to make this garment, and then they were knitted together. They were sewn together. Those pieces were because they were made to go together. The other way of doing that is sometimes manufacturers will just knit a whole bunch of, they just knit a panel of fabric, right? They knit a panel of sweater, and then they cut the pieces out of that and they sew them together. Well, when you're doing that, you end up having to make bigger seams on the inside to get those things to work together. Now, I don't have any sweaters like that to show you. Mine are all fully fashioned, and probably your better sweaters are too. And that means they're gonna lay really nicely on your shoulders and on your sides and everywhere. They're not gonna have big lumpy seams on the inside. So this sweater feels really nice inside. I could almost turn it wrong side out and wear it. You would see the seams, but they're not lumpy, and that's really important. I think you definitely want fully fashioned sweaters. And sometimes a website might say they're fully fashioned. Other times you're just going to have to look at it, or you're going to have to, bank on that brand's reputation that they probably do. This is this is actually a Jenny Kane sweater, and it's fully fashioned, but this is the comparable sweater by Quince at a much better price, and it is also fully fashioned. They're both made very similarly. They have some nice details, and there are no big chunky seams inside. So those are the things that I think you want to look for when you're looking for all of those details that will let you know that this is a quality garment. I hope this helped you out today, and like I said, if you have additional helps for us, feel free to leave those in the comments. I didn't have time to go into everything, nor do I know everything. So I would love to hear from you too. And if this was helpful, please give me a thumbs up. Thanks so much for visiting with me today, ladies, and I'll see you again next Wednesday.